And now, from Pensacola, Florida, it's Within Reason with Bob Kerrigan and Bill Rankin.
Well, good evening and welcome to Within Reason. Bob Kerrigan.
And Bill Rankin.
And we're glad that you are with us. Now, before the show started, Mr. Rankin was telling me that he had some of the most marvelous material. He was so excited about it. Yeah. I personally got a peek, and it wasn't all that interesting to me, but he is interested in giving it to you for your input and reaction, and just like this pass,
I like this. This just came to
the ball
mind.
to you. Yeah.
In America, in our celebrity culture, celebrities can pretty much get away with anything without losing their appeal to the public. I mean, Willie Nelson was stoned his whole life and never paid any taxes and wound up with some enormous tax liability. It was all that Willie. Yeah. You know, they can beat up their spouses, they can ignore their kids, they can marry people they never met, they can just do about any immoral thing, and that's okay, except they cannot be politically incorrect. Oh. Gilbert Gottfried. You know what Gilbert Gottfried is?
I'm not sure.
This guy, Gilbert Gottfried is a guy with a weird voice, and he is the voice, among other things, the voice of the Aflac duck. You know those annoying commercials?
Oh, I didn't know his name.
Yeah, see, that was Gilbert Gottfried.
Okay.
So he made a poor joke about the Japanese during the tsunami. Just, you know, tweeted some bad taste jokes, not too terrible. No. They fired him. No. We cannot have the voice of the Aflac duck have the slightest moral stain in the area of political correctness. He's the voice of the duck. And they fired him now, if all he'd done was abandon his children, become an alcoholic, you know, or not pay his taxes, it was fine. Just Gilbert.
You can't say the wrong thing.
You cannot insult.
Don't you think it's good, though? Don't you think there's some good to this political correctness?
I mean, people used to use disparaging terms for everybody.
They talked like Rodney Dangerfield did, only in real life.
Yeah, yeah.
They
and there is something bad, you know, when everybody refers to you, if you're a woman, as a chick, and you know, it's a little bit demeaning. Well, I don't mean
that was one mistake.
But I made one mistake. Tripwires and to have taboos and magic words. Well, we can say that word, but you can't.
Yes. Yeah.
It's crap. It's nonsense. You know.
The chick thing, I apologized for 2 or 3 times. You keep bringing it up.
You apologized for that?
I did a couple of weeks ago. Well, you just brought it up again.
Well,
as an example of political correctness. Yeah. The one thing I did, the one mistake. Do you talk about the brilliant insights? Do you talk about the marvelous preparation? Nothing. You talked about the chick. You brought the chick up. And you brought it up.
You got an email about it. It didn't strike me as anything. I mean, you call this lady immoral, a manipulator, and everything else. Nobody objected. You called her a chick. My God, that crosses the line. Yeah, that makes the point about political correctness.
She was a socialite. She's a Republican socialite. And she arranged certain events and certain
How does one become a socialite? Is there like a test or
I think if you can write a lascivious email to a 4-star general, you qualify
You could be a socialite.
You could be a socialite.
A socialite.
And make some handsome cash and have some fun.
Terrible.
What a good job.
Being a socialite.
Being a socialite. Yeah. Wasn't that a marvelous job? Yeah. You think that
because being a socialite pretty much puts you out of some 9-to-5 grind where you have to work.
No.
There's none of that.
You work in the evenings.
Right.
Maybe all night. If it's an all-night party, I'm saying anything wrong with that. Could be an all-night party.
Okay.
You had some insights from Eisenhower that you were talking about. Do you have that? Well,
I do have
that would be a little more inspiring than where we are now, probably. So what do you have?
Well,
and by the way, for you, those of you who maybe just joined us, we're going to bash everybody tonight, okay? The $500,000 loan forgiveness people and all the other stuff. It's all coming tonight. I mean, we're sparing nobody. If you're an elected public official, you may want to just turn the TV down or mute it now so that your spouse won't hear some of the things we have to say. So we're going to cover some of that tonight. But go ahead on the higher level now.
Well, yeah. This is I've had this in my notes from some while ago. People are familiar with the famous Eisenhower speech about the military-industrial complex and, letting the military run things. One of the things that was least understood or least popularized about that speech, he said, the effect that militarization can have on kind of the psyche of the country. About constant preparedness for war and military and us and them and attacking and so forth. And it's true. I mean, all we see now, and there's nothing wrong with it, especially for the frontline people who endure awful hardships and take risks with their lives. But the celebration of war, the first-person shooter games, the military people, and they even have this god-awful thing on one of the TV channels, Stars for Stripes, where the celebrities go out and pretend to do that. And we have all this praise in the military stuff, and by God, we're going to kick their butt. Shock and awe about the military. And it's just wrong. And it's going to have some deleterious effect.
Good.
That we don't have, and the people who are, and it has a lot of effects. I mean, one of these effects is we have these political generals, and the political generals are revered, and then we wind up with things like we've seen with General Petraeus. And what people ought to be reminded of is how horrible all this stuff is.
Yes.
Who Wilfred Owen is?
I don't.
Wilfred Owen, this tremendous poetry came out of the First World War. Wilfred Owen was this great poet, and he was a great person. I think he was the one who was killed like on the last day of the war. And he wrote this poem, Dulce et decorum est, which is part of a saying, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. It is fitting and just to die for one's country. And I don't know, let me know. I mean, this poem would probably take 4 minutes to read, but it is so powerful. And I think it's just a great counterbalance to rah, rah, we got Osama bin Laden. Boy, they greased him, huh? How about that?
Yeah.
And all the collateral damage and stuff.
Well, we have following, I forgot exactly when it was passed. I want to say during Jimmy Carter's administration. The anti-assassination law where we can't go assassinate people. But in essence, we do it, and now we're doing it with drones on a regular basis. I do think that we go ahead.
Well, boy, there are two sides to that, though. I mean, finding some of these people, these sworn enemies of not just the United States, sworn enemies of civilization.
Might be the entire country of Egypt right now, but go ahead.
But some of these
people,
awful. Well, Osama bin Laden. I mean, it's hard to say. Well, we shouldn't have gotten him and killed him. And some of his underlings who are just horrible. I mean, they're the people who organized setting off bombs in the middle of religious processions.
Yes. Hiding in schools.
The head of the Taliban's responsible for, if little girls want to go to school, they throw acid at them. I mean, they're just beyond the pale. Bumping off those leaders, I don't know. I don't have an ethical analysis. It doesn't cause me a problem.
But you're going back to war and the glamorizing of military conquests. And I've said this before, so I always quote myself, because not too many of the people that I can quote on this point, but that we have faced as a country the enormous guilt for the way we treated the Vietnam veterans. I mean, just awful. Yeah. We treated them like dirt.
Yeah, that was stupid.
And the country itself is still trying to make up for that disparaging treatment of people who, 50,000 young men and women lost their lives in Vietnam. I mean, my goodness, and the country just didn't have any concern about it.
The crazy thing about it was a lot of those people were draftees.
They were indeed
They got drafted. They answered the call, went to war, they put a uniform, and they come back, and they're baby killers and all of that.
No, it was bad.
I don't know how much of that actually went on. Well, I mean, my own experience, well, we flew into El Toro, which you couldn't, a lot of the protesters couldn't have gotten on that because it was a Marine base. I don't know.
Well, the reaction of the public now to the military it's very alarming. We respect our military as we respect our police officers and other people who help keep us safe and help the country, protect the country from enemies of the country. But this revering of everybody because they're wearing a uniform is really sending the wrong message to young people, I think. Like, wait just a second. This is important and our country needs it, but all of this deference that's being paid, and it's artificial. It's insincere. It's yellow ribbons on your car.
It's so cheap and easy.
It is cheap and easy. Yeah.
Well, no, my kid's not volunteering for the service, but thank you for your service, and you know, we're going to pay for your prosthetics.
Institute the draft tomorrow, and we'll see how many people we have standing up and applauding.
We're all happy about it. Or we ought to have a war tax. We talked about this before.
Indeed.
We don't have a war tax. We don't have a draft. You can avoid it. Just stand up a couple of times during the baseball game and be sure to take your hat off.
Speaking of the baseball game, I would like, you have mentioned this several times. We don't exactly agree.
I don't think we disagree.
Well, we may.
Because what I've said is the ballpark was well run. The ball games were a great experience. Since you didn't go to any, I don't think you can disagree with that.
Well, it's hard to disagree with it, and thank you for pointing that out.
But it was very well run, and the ball games were a great experience. And the stadium, it was amazing to me how cool the stadium stayed even in the summer evenings.
It's marvelous.
It's a nice place. It's a very expensive, well-designed place.
Let's say this. It's the finest AA baseball park that's ever been built. Yeah, there's none better. $58 million. And in $58 million, they didn't quite have enough money to put in things to make popcorn. They didn't reserve enough money to put in, like, stuff in the kitchen.
Really?
Oh, no.
Didn't know that. I thought that was in the back in the
atrium. No. That's $58 million, and they weren't quite able to finish the kitchen, so they made a deal with a tenant that if you'll give us some pots and pans money to finish this up, we'll give you the concessions.
Oh, that's how that
that was about. A good deal. It was a good deal.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, there's another thing, too. For the $58 million, and these are ballpark numbers. I'd love for somebody to call and tell us actually it's more or less. This was supposed to be a multi-use facility. Well, everybody knows going back, it's supposed to be a museum.
Right.
It's supposed to be University of West Florida. It's supposed to have
retail
shops. And the baseball park was a small part of the overall complex. It is now the complex, plus the out parcels for buildings, but it is the complex. When they built it, remember it was going to be this multi-use stadium facility. Well, after they spent $58 million, guess what they found out? They didn't have enough money to build a cheap amphitheater.
Right.
So
or to finish it out.
They found to build it.
Even to build it. They had to borrow that money.
They got a donation from a very generous benefactor, which we won't mention, but everybody knows these folks are very generous people in our community. So they gave $1 million. It's Skip and Martha Hunter. So they gave $1 million to build the amphitheater. But guess what? In the $58 million, they didn't have quite enough money to build any kind of support facilities for the amphitheater. So they had to borrow $500,000 from another government agency, really borrowed it from the city, to put in.
So this is the Community Maritime Park Association,
right?
Which is separate from the CRA,
correct?
Right, and which is separate from the city, kind of.
Kind of. The CRA is a geographical area in which a certain amount of money is collected from ad valorem taxes. We'll just say approximately $3 million, because that's approximately correct. And that $3 million is to be used within this development area, downtown. Well, the $3 million, as it turns out, is now going to be largely consumed by debt obligations.
Right.
So you have this problem. You have an organization called the CRA, for which the board of directors or the officers or whatever are the city council. It's the same people. But you have the CRA. Actually, the CRA couldn't support this kind of debt. So the city of Pensacola had to actually incur the debt. The city of Pensacola incurs the debt and they build a stadium. But Bill, nobody ever said this. Now I wonder how much we can rent it for, because that would dictate how much you would spend to build it. And you'd say, well, if we can only rent it for $2 a day, then you're not going to build a $2 million facility, okay?
That's
well,
not the way government thinks.
Well, the government doesn't think that way. And none of these people thought about much other than we're going to get this thing built. So at the end of the road here, they spent all this money and then threw in $1.5 million from two sources, one private donation, another borrow $500,000 to build something that the public can actually use for, you know, concerts and things like that. So where are we now? Well, we had a request that the Community Maritime Park Association and doesn't have any money, and there very little money. The reason
they wanted to forgive the loan.
Well, the reason they have very little money is that they struck, long before some of the people that are on there now, admittedly, particularly the head guy, long before that, they struck a very, very bad deal with a tenant that owns the Blue Wahoos. So this tenant is paying what any reasonable person would consider a nominal amount of rent for this huge facility, for this $60 million facility, paying a nominal amount of rent to use it. So they don't have enough money, and the CMPA gets all their money from a tenant, okay? And a little advertising and other stuff, so they don't have enough money. So they have $500,000. They claim they told everybody from the get-go that they probably weren't going to have any money. They don't have any money, so they made this request to forgive a $500,000 loan. Well, what does that mean? It means that the taxpayers are being sent, here's the bill.
Right.
You, mom and pop taxpayer, you're going to pay $500,000 because of the level of mistakes that were made at every level from the day they decided to abandon the overall concept that the taxpayers approved and build a baseball park. So now we're back to this. We started this. In fairness, the tenant who has the franchise, by the way, he owns the Blue Wahoos. We don't. Taxpayers don't own it. They're a privately owned investment that he has. Runs his baseball thing and did a good job. And you said it,
yeah.
Right?
Oh, everybody said it. And
did a great job.
I've never heard any dissent. It's nicely run and it's a good experience, and I highly recommend it. It's fun.
Highly recommend it. Here's the problem. That entity, the CMPA, and their tenant, who has the baseball park, has the baseball franchise, they sit over here and they get a little money from this for the CMPA and money for him, and they share different deals, and that's fine. And the CMPA doesn't need much money to survive, maybe $1 million a year, so then they got their own little deal going. Here's the problem. Over here sits us, the taxpayers, and we're sitting here with a bill, okay, that's going to be what one of our esteemed writers has said, over $80 million for the repay. But we're sitting over here with all the debt obligation, and these people over here who are running the baseball park and their tenant, they don't have anything to do with the debt. They don't have any obligation to pay the debt. And honestly, as far as the tenant's concerned and everybody else, they probably don't really care if the debt gets paid, because if the debt is not paid, it doesn't affect them. It affects the city.
Isn't that always the way it is with a tenant? I mean, if you rent an apartment in an apartment house, you neither know nor care how much the owner owes on the debt. This is your rent. You pay your rent, and then you have the occupancy. But and the tenant pays rent. Now, the tenant got an extraordinarily good deal in this case.
Here's the difference. We are paying for it as taxpayers. This is not a private builder that owns a building or an apartment building. This is the government. This is our government has created this financial burden for all of us, and by the way, exhausted our borrowing capabilities with this debt, including the $20 million it's going to take to move in this sewer plant. So the combination of those two things exhausts our borrowing power through the city of the CRA. So we can't do anything. We have put all of our marbles into this basket, Bill, and that is to the baseball park. Now I'll just ask you, if I said to you, I'm going to give you, personally, just you, to preside over this for the benefit of the city, $60 million to improve the city of Pensacola. Can you imagine what could be done with that kind of money? I mean, just across the board.
The city of Pensacola is not that big.
And the city's not, you could have underground utilities, you could have an enhanced historic district. All of these things would have fostered economic development. Yeah, so we put all our eggs in this basket. Why? Why did we do that? Why did we get to this point where the tail was wagging the dog? And I do think the tail is wagging the dog now. And what we've seen with this 500,000 is the beginning of a long series of problems.
There's no question that the ballpark is a big financial problem for the city, right?
And maybe
58 million. That's over $1,000 for every man, woman, and child in the city of Pensacola.
That's right.
That's what you owe now.
That's what we
now,
owe.
maybe you won't necessarily have to pay it. If you move out, you don't, or maybe your kids will pay it if they stick around. Somebody's going to pay it.
When we come back, we are going to continue this discussion as this problem impacts our community in downtown Pensacola. We'll be back after this short break.